JMath.
In this video, we'll be looking at questions where they ask you to find the equation of a cubic function. So there's three main types of questions that you'll encounter, and then there's those other horrible level 4 type questions that there's no specific thing to look for that's always going to work. You just need to know your work very well, and then hopefully you can figure it out. But let's focus on the ones that you can study, and these are the ones you see on screen. So the main type of question is when they give you three x-intercepts. Okay, then you need to study that formula that you see. So y equals a, x minus x1, x minus x2, x minus x3. So it's the very same formula as you learned in grade 11 with parabolas, but now it just has a third bracket connected to it. That I use when I have three x-intercepts and another random point. Okay, type 2 is when you can see it's this tan-shaped graph where there's not two turning points, but only one turning point or point of inflection. They'll give you that value and then another random point. Then you can use that equation. Now, both of those are not on your formula sheet. So you must please study them before you go into the exam. Remember, with some of these questions, the first question, like question 6.1, would be get the equation, and then they ask you 6 or 7 questions following on from that. Most of the time, they'll tell you prove the equation is something, but there has been exams where if you don't get the first question, the rest of your paper is, or the rest of that question is doomed because you can't then work out anything else. So please study those two. The third type is if they only give you a turning point or a stationary point, and then they give you certain parts of the formula. I'll explain examples now for you that you can see exactly what I mean, but then you follow type 3's recipe to get the equation. So please take a screenshot, study these three, but let's look at a few questions. For question 1, I can see there are three x-intercepts and a random point. So immediately I know I'm going to go y is equal to a, and then x, x, x. So step 1, I'm going to sub in those three values that I can see. So there's a -1. Now, when you sub in, it's always the opposite sign. So I'm going to change that to a +1. This is -1, and that's -3. Now, step 2 is to take this value and sub it into all three x's and the y. So that would be -6. And then all three of the other x's, I would make a 2. Okay, the point of this is to figure out what is a. So this is -6. That's just an a. This bracket gives me a 3. This bracket gives me a 1. And this bracket gives me a -1. Now, 3 times 1 times -1 gives me -3. Therefore, a is equal to -6 over -3. So a is actually equal to 2. Now I go back to the first line, and I'm going to start foiling the brackets, but now I know that my a value is actually 2. So then x plus 1, and I'm going to foil the last two. So x squared minus 3x minus 1x gives me minus 4x, and then plus 3. Okay, so 2 more steps. Now I'm going to multiply the x in with all 3, and the 1 in with all 3, and then just simplify. So this is going to be x cubed minus 4x squared plus 3x plus 1x squared minus 4x plus 3. And then my final answer I get when I simplify the bracket and times the 2 in there. So it's going to be x cubed times 2 is 2x cubed. Now I'm looking at the squares. There's a -4 plus 1. That gives me -3. I need to times that by 2. So that's -6x squared. Then with just the x's, +3 minus 4 gives me -1, times 2 gives me -2x, and then for the last one, 2 times 3 gives me +6. And there I got the equation of that graph. Question 2, I don't see turning points, and it's not in a funny tan shape, but if I look nicely, I can see x-intercepts. There aren't 3, but I can see all the x-intercepts. So what that means is that there's going to be a duplicate bracket. So my first bracket is just x minus -2, and then x minus 3, but I'm going to write that twice because it's a turning point. Okay, now I'm looking for any other coordinate that I can just sub in, and I can see there's a 0 and -18. So I put the -18 in the place of y, and then all my zeros go into the place of all three x's. Now I can just solve for a. Now that I know a is -1, I can just write it there and start foiling the bracket. So x minus 3 times x minus 3 gives me x squared minus 6x plus 9, and then just foil the rest. And my final answer to this question would be minus x cubed, and then -6 plus 2 gives me -4, times the minus gives me plus 4x squared. 9 minus 12 is -3, times -1 is plus 3x, and then plus 18 times -1 gives me -18. Perfect. That is how I use the 3 brackets formula to get the equation of a cubic. For question 3 and 4, I can see each graph only has one turning point, and therefore the equation I can use is that one up there. Please study it. It's not on your formula sheet. So to start this off with, I'm just firstly going to sub in the p and the q value. So I'm going to keep the a there, and that's x minus 2 cubed plus 3. So now I'm just going to sub in the random point, and that would be 2 is equal to a, and then 1 minus 2 cubed plus 3. I can now just work out what is a, and then just sub it back into the original, and that would be my final answer. And there we go. Final answer, a is 1, so therefore y is equal to x minus 2 in a bracket cubed plus 3. Let's do the same for question 4. In this case, I can see that my p-value is going to be minus 2, so in the bracket is going to be x minus 2, and then a minus 4 at the end. Now I can just go and sub in the other point that I have. So they're trying to hide it for me, but that is the origin. So I can just put that in x and y. Okay, so 0 goes there, 0 goes there. Then I can just solve for a, and I can take the 4 to the left, and therefore 2 squared is 4. So 4 equals 4a. Therefore a is just 1. Final answer to the question is then just y is equal to x plus 2 cubed minus 4. Question 5. Now, if I look at this, I don't see any x-intercepts. It's not in a funny shape, but they do show me that the turning point is 1 and 2. So now I need to use that to find two equations and then do simultaneous equations. So first step, 1 and 2 is a point on the normal fx graph. So I can sub that into y and x to get my first equation. Normally with these equations, I want the one that's more to the right alone. So I'm going to keep the b where it is, and then I'm just going to move the rest over. So it's going to be 2 plus 9 plus 3, so that's going to be 14 minus a, and that would be equation 1. Now I need to find another equation, and in this case, 1 and 2 is actually the coordinates of my turning point. So therefore, I can get the derivative of f. Let me do that first. So the derivative would be equal to 3ax squared minus 18x plus b. Now, very important. Remember when we sketched graphs, to get a turning point, I make the derivative equal to 0, and that gives me the x value. So I'm not going to sub the 2 in. I'm actually going to make it equal to 0. And then I can make all the x's a 1. And now I can get b alone again, and that would be equation 2. So now I just need to do simultaneous equations, and that's how I would solve a and b. So I'm just going to say, make equation 1 equal to equation 2. So 14 minus a should be equal to 18 minus 3a. I'm going to take all the a's to the left, and then it's 3 minus 1 gives me 2a, and 18 minus 14 gives me 4. Therefore, a is equal to 2. I can just sub that into any of my equations. It's going to take the top one, and then I can see, but b is equal to 14 minus 2, and therefore b is equal to 12. The question was to solve for the equation, or to solve for a and b, so let me just write that down, and that would then be my final answer. Great. That is then my final answer. 2x cubed minus 9x squared plus 12x minus 3. Let's look at question 6. So this one is very deceptive, because I can see I have a turning point. I can see the turning point is also an x-intercept, but I don't have the other x-intercept. So if I just go through normal logic, I'm not allowed to use the first type because I don't see the other x-intercept. But in actual case, if you do the third type, where you try and get two equations, because there's a b, and a c value that's unknown, you are going to get stuck. It is possible, but it is very, very long. So please, if you have 3 variables in your question that you need to solve, then most of the time, they are going to give you the coefficient of x cubed. Okay, so remember, that's actually the correct a value. They're just trying to trick you by putting an a there as well. But in my formula, that is the a that I always want to work out. So in this case, I'm actually going to use the x-intercept formula, because they give me a. So I know a is minus 1. I don't know what the other x is, so I'm just going to keep it, let's just make it x minus a k. But because the turning point is at 2 and the turning point is an x-intercept, I know both of these brackets would be a 2. And that now enables me to get a formula where I have 3 variables, but 2 of them are x and y. So that means I can just sub in the other value that I have, 3 and the minus 6, and that's how I would solve for k. So y is minus 6 if x is 3, 3, and 3. So now I can just simplify a bit. So minus 6 is equal to minus 1, 3 minus k. This is just a 1, and this is just a 1. So I'm in actual fact just going to divide by minus on both sides. So 6 is equal to 3 minus k. Take the k to this side and the 6 to the other side. So k is minus 3. Now I can go back to the first step and just put in the minus 3, FOIL everything out, and that's how I'm going to get the equation. And the final answer would then be minus x cubed, and then plus x squared plus 8x and minus 12. Okay, guys, so this was a level 4 question where you couldn't just take a normal formula and just sub in. You needed to actually know a bit more and put in an extra variable there. So on my picture, I can put a k there. And that's how I solved this one. So just be prepared. Sometimes they throw you a curveball. Question 7. So you can also get questions where they don't even give you a sketch. They just give you a lot of info, and you need to know how to use the info. So in this case, if I look at the points that they give me, there's a 0, there's a 0, and there's a 0. So they are actually giving me 3 x-intercepts and a y-intercept, which means I can immediately start with the 3 brackets formula. So I know my first bracket is going to be minus 6, then minus 1, and then minus 2, which I'm just going to make a plus 2. The random point that I'm going to use is the y-intercept, but as long as it's not an x-intercept, I can sub anything in as long as I know x and y. So I know y is minus 12 when all the other x's are 0. And if I sub in and simplify, I can see that my a value is just minus 1. So now I can start the whole process again of foiling out these brackets and then see what my final answer would be. That's it. Final answer is y equals to minus x cubed plus 5x squared plus 8x minus 12. For question 8, the graph of fx, and they give me all the details, passes through the points minus 3 and 0 and has a stationary point at 2 and 0. Find the values of a and b. Okay, so I can see the keyword stationary point, but what's more important to me is that I can actually see all my x-intercepts. Remember, if a stationary point or a turning point is an x-intercept, it means there's a duplicate bracket for that specific value. So if I start my formula and sub in, I can say y is equal to a, and then x minus 3, so x plus 3, and then my stationary point, x minus 2, x minus 2. Okay, so now, normally I would sub in a random other value that they give me. I can't sub in anything that ends on a 0, but I can sub in anything else, but I don't have anything. So guys, I can't tell you how many times in exam I personally got stuck on a question like this because I can't find the third value. Please learn from my mistakes. They are actually giving you the a value, and therefore this question is just about foiling out. It's not about finding a. So I can then rewrite this as y is equal to minus 1 and then start foiling out all the brackets. Please don't make my mistakes again. Learn from me and be smarter. Great. Answer is y equals minus x cubed plus x squared plus 8x minus 12. Question 9, the graph of fx that they give me has a local minimum at 2 and minus 3. Find the values of k and p. Now remember, local minimum or local maximum is just keyword for turning point. So this is a type 3 sum where I'm going to get equation 1 and equation 2 and do simultaneous to find the values of k and p. Or maybe there's a shortcut. Let's see. So because 2 and minus 3 is a point on fx, I can start by immediately subbing in those values. I can see my y value is minus 3, and the other 3 x's, I'm just going to make a 2. So let's simplify this a little bit. Minus 3 is equal to 8k, and then 2 squared is 4, times minus 3 gives me minus 12. That is minus 12 times 2, so minus 24, and then plus p. So in this case, if I move the minus 12 and the minus 24 over, that would be minus 3 plus 36. So 33 is equal to 8k plus p. Or if I want p alone, I can say it's 33 minus 8k. So that is equation 1. Now remember, to get equation 2, I would get the derivative and make it equal to 0 when I sub in x. So let's go for that. So the derivative of f would be equal to 3kx squared minus 6x minus 12. If I make this equal to 0, I can make all the x's a 2. And we are lucky in this case. The p cancelled out, so I can now actually solve for k and then just sub it into equation 1 to get p. So let's just go for that. So I can see minus 6 times 2 gives me minus 12. There's another minus 12, so that gives me minus 24. I'm just going to move it to this side. And this would be 2 squared again is 4 times 3 gives me 12k. So therefore k is equal to 2. And if I sub the 2 in there, then 33 minus 8 times 2 equals p. So 33 minus 16 gives me 17 as p. So they didn't ask me to rewrite the formula. You can if you want to and tell them fx is equal to 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 12x plus 17. Or you can just leave it with p is equal and k is equal because that's what they actually asked. Okay, guys, I know this is a long video. Let's just look at one more variation. And hopefully no one will be able to trick you with questions like these again. So at the beginning of this video, I gave you 3 types of sums. Okay, if they give you all the x-intercepts, if you see it's a weird tan-shaped graph, or if they give you the turning point and nothing else. Now there's another variation that I didn't speak of, but it links very closely to type 3. That is when they give you the tangent and they tell you where the graph touches. Okay, so we're going to use the same concept as in type 3. First thing I'm going to do is I want the tangent line in standard form so I can see what the gradient of that tangent is. So I'm going to say y is equal to, I'm going to move the 3x over and divide everything by 2. So divided by 2, divided by 2. So y is equal to minus 3 over 2x plus 3. I don't really care about the formula. I care about the gradient. So therefore, gradient of this line is equal to minus 3 over 2. So note that I'm not writing m is minus 3 over 2 because they're trying to trick me by putting another m in the question. So step 1 is now done. I have the gradient, and I know the gradient is equal to that when x is equal to 1. So very important, we are going to use that later. But in this question, so normally to find equation 1 with a type 3 sum, I need an x and a y to sub into the normal formula. To get y in this case, I'm actually going to sub it into this equation or this simplified equation. Let's go for the bottom one. It just looks a bit easier. So in this case, I can say y is equal to minus 3 over 2 times 1 and then plus 3. So 3 over 2 is actually 1.5, and 3 minus 1.5 is just 1.5, but now it's positive. So now I have an x value and I have a y value. I can use this in the original equation to then figure out what is my equation 1. So I'm going to say y, so 3 over 2, is equal to 2k, and then my x value is 1 cubed minus m 1 squared. If I simplify this, this is 3 over 2. That's just 2k, and that's just m. So I can now just get m alone. So I'm going to move the m to the left and then say 2k minus 3 over 2 would be equation 1. So now to get equation 2, I'm going to get the derivative. So the derivative of this specific thing would be equal to m, and that would be equal to 6kx squared minus 2mx in this case. Now, if they gave us the turning point, I would make it equal to 0 and sub in the x value. They didn't. They gave me the gradient of a tangent. So in this case, I'm actually going to use this info and not the y value. Okay, guys, don't get confused. The derivative is all about the gradient. At a turning point, the gradient is 0. But in this specific case, they tell me the gradient is minus 3 over 2 when x is equal to 1. So I'm just going to sub that in. Let me just get my correct pen. So minus 3 over 2 is equal to 6k 1 squared minus 2m times 1. And now I can just solve that to get equation 2 in this case. So minus 3 over 2 is equal to 6k minus 2m. Okay, so I can just simplify again to get m alone. So 2m is equal to 6k plus 3 over 2. I want m alone. So I'm just going to divide by 2 everywhere. So 3k plus 3 over 4. That is equation 2. And now I can just sub in to find all my values. So now that I have equation 1 and equation 2, I can just make them equal to each other, solve for k, and then solve for m afterwards. So 2k minus 3 over 2 would be equal to 3k plus 3 over 4. I'm going to bring all the k's to the right, so that's going to give me 3 minus 2 is just 1. And then on the other side, this would be minus 3 over 2 minus 3 over 4. And therefore, my calculator would tell me k is equal to minus 9 over 4 in this case. Now I can just sub that into either equation 1 or 2, and that's how I'm going to find the m value. So if I want the m value, I'm just going to sub the minus 9 over 4 into equation 1, and it's going to look like this, and therefore m would then just be equal to minus 9 over 2 minus 3 over 2. That gives me minus 12 over 2, so m is equal to minus 6. Okay, that was also a fairly difficult question, but it's something that has been asked in exams before, so please make sure all the steps make sense. Great, guys, that's how to find the equation of a cubic function. It is a quite complicated section, so please make sure you know what's going on here.
If this video helped you, please like and subscribe.
JMath.